All right, everybody, we are live. And by everybody, I mean just me and Tom because I literally just hit the button to go live. So I highly doubt even the most loyal of our fans have tuned in quite that quickly. But within the next few minutes here, some of you should arrive. And we look forward to that here. Oh, okay, there we go. We've got two people. You two are our most loyal fans, so congratulations. Tuning in 1 minute before the webinar is supposed to start. So welcome. My name is Taylor Chu, in case you haven't seen my face here before. One of the co-founders of SQL Prep. And Tom is also here. He's the other co-founder of SQL Prep.
Hey there, everybody. Glad that you're back again. So Taylor, while we're waiting for some people to come in, did you have any good data problems to solve today?
I think a data problems to solve today. Yeah, I guess there was one that I was working on. So I work for a firm that works with eye doctors, and they help to send out reminder phone calls to patients who are about to need to come back into the office for an appointment. And so in this case, it was, there's SQL involved. There's a situation where the automated calls were supposed to get sent at 7:30 a.m., but our software has it set up so that those can't be sent out until 8 a.m. or later, because the service that does the automated calls sort of stinks. And so our customer service rep was asking me to look into that and see why it was that it was doubling up calls. So it was wanting to make the same calls twice. So essentially sending over 2 rows for each patient in each file. And so I went ahead and looked at that, and then I was able to look in the one table and find that, oh, there's this blackout time period. And so then I knew, oh, okay, this must be going out early. Went ahead and checked the other table and saw that, okay, yeah, this is set to go at 7:30, which is a no-go. And so then problem solved. So not too tricky, just to select from a couple different tables, although I guess you can see from that, just all that data isn't stored just in one place. It's separated out into 2 different tables, which we can get into at a different time, is why those would be separated out. Although I guess in a sense, we'll sort of get into that today and see how
a little bit,
perhaps
right?
in Tom's world of business intelligence, those actually might be in the same place.
Yeah, that's a fun one though. Debugging in data, always a fun one, right?
Yep, always a fun one. So in case you just tuned in here in the last minute and wonder what the heck I'm talking about, Tom was just asking me how my day at work went. So I was telling him about one of the data problems that I ran into. And we'll just wait for another minute or two here. Looks like we've got several people here right now. Tom, did you have anything interesting happen at work today? Data related?
Yeah, actually right now I'm running into a bunch of data modeling items right now where, we've got a lot of requests coming in, and there's a lot of business questions that need to be answered, and so we're just looking for what's the best way to model that data. So just a lot of going through scenarios, going through what's best for the future, because of course would answer the questions of today, but we want to make sure that we'll be able to answer the questions that come up tomorrow as well. So that's what filled up my day today. Lots of modeling.
Awesome. Well, there you go. And if you're curious to learn more, then good, because you're about to, as we get going here. All right, so looks like we've got some more people here joining us. So why don't we get started? So once again, my name is Taylor Chu. For all of you who don't know me, I'm one of the co-founders here at SQL Prep, and I am joined today by the awesome Tom here as well.
Hey there.
Yep, voice activated. And so today we're going to be talking about a topic that's really interesting: dimensional data modeling. And if you are really new to SQL and you just sort of getting the basics of a select, a from, and a where clause, then chances are this whole concept of dimensional data modeling, or at least that vocabulary, hasn't really passed in front of your eyes yet. But so it can be a little bit more of an advanced topic with SQL, but we'll just be talking about the basics of it today. And this sort of carries on with the theme that we talked about last week, which is about business intelligence. Last week, we talked about 5 sample business intelligence interview questions. And this week, we're going to continue that discussion, talking about one of those core concepts, this dimensional data modeling. If you came to this initially from the email that we sent out earlier in the week, then you remember from that I was talking about how sometimes in business settings, if you're trying to write these analytical queries with these analytical functions like the ones we went over last week, then sometimes the transactional based database system is not going to be your most efficient way. So we're going to get into why that is and how our dimensional data models will help to remedy that issue. So without further ado, we'll turn it over to Tom here, who will be leading us through this discussion.
All right, Taylor, that sounds fantastic. Let me just share my screen really quick here for you all. That way you'll be able to see the slides that I'm going to be going through. So yes, today, dimensional data modeling. Some of you probably haven't heard of dimensional data modeling, and that's okay. You know, if you're pretty new to SQL, then sometimes it takes years before people hear about some of these concepts. Really, though, to get you a good foundation, I'd like to start out by really comparing 2 different types of database systems. A lot of people think, oh, databases, they're all just one thing, but really there are lots of different kinds of databases, and 2 that are most prevalent that you probably use the most are OLTP systems and then OLAP or OLAP systems. So first, let's talk about the transactional system first. Online transaction processing. Those systems are really good at running applications. They're really good at running websites. Basically, what they do is they just are really good at storing lots of information, storing it only once, and not having data redundancy. So that's why they're really good for apps, because if I go on Amazon a lot, and I don't know what I would do if I was going to check out and the price in my cart before I checked out was $20, and then the price in my car, or when I was at the checkout, was $50. That would be terrible. And so OLTP systems want that consistency, want that data stored just one time. Down at the bottom there, you see that 3NF. That might be a little fancy for some of you. That's called normalized form. So 3NF, there's a lot more than 3 actually, but most systems just like to go to 3NF. And what that really means is that we're going to be following really good OLTP modeling standards. I think that's the simplest way I can say that. The analytical system, though, really is going to focus on different things. Transactional needs to run apps and websites, so it needs to be accurate, and it needs to only store data once. With analytical systems, we really want to just analyze the data that's in those transactional systems. So we want to get that data out as easily and as quickly as possible. So convenience and performance are the most important things. So sometimes we might have a little bit of data redundancy, usually not too much, but we do that so that way we can get data out faster and a lot easier for people who are actually building the reports. So today we're just going to be talking about the analytical system. So let's go deeper here into the process of how you actually make an analytical database. We begin our modeling process that we have to do, absolutely necessary, is we need to determine the needs of the business. Next, we need to determine the necessary grain. And then we need to determine what dimensions are necessary. And lastly, we need to determine what fact or facts are necessary to answer their question. We're going to dig into that a little bit deeper here. So business needs, they determine everything. So Taylor, let's pretend that a university is approaching you, and
Approaching me, okay.
Yeah, they want some analytics done on their system. And universities store so much information about students, about classes, about finances, uh,
Uh-huh.
how many people are applying, just so much information. So if they're like, Taylor, can you run some analytics for us? What would you say?
I'd be like, sure, although you need to show me a little bit more about the data here and what specifically it is that you're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, with such a task like that, you really have to let the business drive the analytics that you're doing. Because I don't know about you, Taylor, but I've worked at some places where we make reports for users and then they never use them or they use them incorrectly. And so, really, reports are only as good as what value the business gets out of them, right? And so, if they tell you and ask you for specifically, chances are it's going to be used.
Yeah, let me I have got a quick story on that one. So actually in a distant universe where it may have been our friends or maybe it was us doing it, I won't say. But years ago, Tom and I were little youngins and we wanted to get our feet wet making websites. And so we had a friend, and if that friend's here, then hi. But we had a friend who had a business idea and he wanted us to make a website for him. And so we were all excited about it. It was just an opportunity to test out our skills. And so we started down making it, and I mean, we made a good chunk of it, and then we went and we were excited to show him what we had. And then he was like, "Oh, that's pretty sweet." But I was looking at some of these other designs on this site and this site, and hey, do you think you could change this piece here or that piece there? And we're like, "Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, we could probably do that." And then after talking to him, we went back and huddled about it, and we realized that, holy cow, we're gonna have to recode this entire thing to make that happen. And amazingly, we let that process occur probably a few times before we decided to approach it a little differently. And so that's a little case here of us not finding business needs, and so us having to essentially spend hours doing useless work. And same thing applies here, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I've worked with so many people writing reports, and the ones that they really dictate, so the ones that they're really involved in the planning process, and they are so much more useful because they know exactly why they need it. They know exactly how they're going to use it. So, some people may say, well, we can skip over this because it's not very technical. Well, it's really important to get really good at talking to people if you want to do some report writing or do some modeling. It's just so important to understand the process and understand the actual needs of the business. So that's the first step. Don't let that one trip you up. So after maybe you've put together some business questions, they're if they're at a university and they want to understand what kinds of students are applying for their school. What we're going to do is we're going to determine what level of grain they're actually asking for. And the term grain, a simple definition of it is a level of detail, and that's going to apply to a fact. When we talk about facts and dimensional data modeling, we're really just talking about numbers in the end. For example, the number 4. Um, Unfortunately, though, that doesn't really tell us much, right? Just the number 4 alone doesn't tell us much. But what we're able to do is we're able to surround it with context, and we're able to understand the level of detail so we can really build powerful reports. So if we're looking at this example, the students who are applying to our school, and the number 4, we may say our grain is uh, students who've applied in a calendar year. That could be a grain. We could go even further by looking at where they come from. We could be looking at the different schools that they're applying from, like high schools that they apply from. All these different levels could change our grain if we add more context, if we add more information, like saying, well, what school did they come from, for example. That's going to add context and thus going to change our grain. So this concept of grain can sometimes be a little bit tricky. I think as we get into more examples, it's going to make a lot more sense as we start talking through some examples here. So let's move on here, though. This concept of context is really important. And that's what we call dimensions. So context for a measure. So if we're measuring people who have been contacted, for example, some context we may want to know about that. If we see 19 people have been contacted, well, maybe we want to know what demographic that person falls in, or why they were contacted, or how they were contacted, or what were all the reasons for the contact, right? We can dig in deep and drill down and get so much more information that is actionable if we have that context. And so we make these dimensions, like we may have a person dimension, and we may have a contact type dimension, and we may have a contact type or a contact reason dimension. And so we're able to surround this fact with all these different dimensions, and they're very extendable, because if we need to add more information about contact reasons, for example, then we just add those to our contact reason dimension. Or if we need more information around the person we contacted, we just add more columns to that dimension. And then lastly, they're very reusable. One very easy example is a date dimension. It's super cool. You look at a transactional system, and a lot of times you'll just see a date was stored, like when did this user log in, or when was this person contacted. With date dimensions, you can get so much more context. Like easy example is this a USA holiday? Is this a French holiday? Is this a weekend? Is this in Q1 or Q3? There's all these different kinds of there's a bunch of different contexts you can have, and for each piece of information that you need more context of, for example, in this case, dates, you can reuse it multiple times. So if we say, what was the start date time of the call, what was the end date and time of the call, then we can get all of that context for each of those attributes that we're measuring in the fact. So some very cool stuff. We'll look at this a little bit deeper as well, but dimensions really allow us to drill in so deep into these numbers that we're generating. All right, and so oh yeah, do you have something, Taylor?
Yes, you noticed me come off of mute there. So, okay, so we talked about grain, we talked about dimensions. I guess we're going to talk about facts now here. Anybody have any questions about dimensions or grain so far?
That's a great.
If you're coming from the transactional side of SQL, then this is probably pretty foreign to you. But it is definitely a different way to look at tables in general, and I guess the whole model, but maybe at a simple level, just looking at tables very differently in terms of how you're going to structure them. Okay, well, if you do have any questions, go ahead and pop them there in the comments, and we will swing back around to those. But if not at the moment, then let's let Tom continue here talking about facts.
All right, fantastic. So the last thing that we need to have in our dimensional data model are facts. Facts are important because they're really going to show the key metrics that are important to the business. So these would be like, what are the number of sales, or what was our gross revenue, or how many students applied to our university. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to take our fact table, and we're going to make keys in our fact table, and those are going to relate to the dimensions. And so this way we're able to say, okay, I know that the number of students who applied to my university was 2,000. And then if we want more information, we're able to see what context is around that 2,000. For example, who were the individuals who actually applied, and what were their demographics, and where did they come from, and what schools did they go to in the past, all that kind of stuff. So that's really the basics. Those are the foundation, or that's the foundation of data, dimensional data modeling, excuse me.
Hey, Tom, so
yeah,
we do have a question here right before I get to it, though. So if I'm understanding right, then, so you've got facts, and then you've got dimensions, are essentially two main types of tables in this analytical system, in this in the system here. Is that correct?
Yeah, and so really all of your tables at a basic level, you're going to have facts in the middle, and then you're going to have dimensions around that around the fact. And that's actually what we commonly call a star schema. And we favor doing it that way because there's relatively few joins from the fact then. And so when we query it, we're selecting from the fact table and then bringing in the context from those dimensions via the foreign keys.
Okay.
So really quick, very performant.
Okay. So, and then the facts are, I think I've often heard it described as facts are the events that are happening in whatever it is you're modeling. And then the dimensions are the actual objects or things or people or essentially the nouns, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's
At a very basic level.
Yeah, I mean, like if that's what it takes to start to understand the concept, then that's perfect. Yeah, because if you're looking at facts, you're looking at applications, right? Like as in like the verb application, so like an event, right? And then the context, the dimensions are going to be like the people and the schools that they came from, the nouns, exactly like you were saying.
Okay, great. So then that leads us into our question here from M. Solosa. Thank you for your question. Who asked grain example or grain example? I guess referring to what's an example of a grain. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, I guess the easiest way to look at grain generally is to look at sales because I think everyone has a pretty good concept of sales. And so if we look at the number 4 just alone, that would be the total number of sales to begin with, right? If we just had 4 and there was no grain, then that would represent all the sales that had happened for all time. But most people when they do reporting, they don't want to see the whole time, right? Because that doesn't give us an idea of trends. It doesn't give us an idea of who are the most successful salesmen or what are the most successful products. And so you notice I just mentioned some nouns, right? Salesman, for example, right? That if we add that into our fact, now we've changed our grain. And so that would be the example of grain. If we had salesmen and then the number of sales that they had, the grain would be the salesman. But that may not be sufficient either, right? Because maybe we need sales by product as well, right? So we need to see salesmen and product and the number of sales. And so if we have that, that would now be our grain, salesman and product.
Okay. And so as we keep on, of the two.
Exactly. As we keep on adding these nouns, so maybe we want to know the day it happened or the location where the sale happened or the company that the sale happened with. As we add each of these nouns, the grain changes, and we define the grain by each of these nouns, basically.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Okay, great. Yeah, I think that's a good explanation there. M. Solosa, if you have a further question in regards to that, go ahead and let us know too, so we can address that as well. Hopefully that helped out, though. All right, great. So let's continue on then. Tom, take it away.
All right, no more questions? Feel free to chime in with any questions, y'all. If you
M says okay.
If you do. Okay, I hope that answered that for you. Let's move on. Here's the data model. It's pretty big, wouldn't you say, Taylor? I mean, I've definitely seen much bigger than this, but
I've seen much smaller too.
That's right. So
if you've worked through some of our daily challenges, then this one's a beast compared to that for sure.
Exactly. And so the point I want to make here is I can't even read all these tables, but really the point is we can't just look at a system and say right away, I know exactly what dimensional data modeling needs to occur. That's just impossible. What we really need to do is follow our process, and we need to ask the business what they want to understand about their data. And then once we understand their needs, then we're able to start the process. So I've got a much simpler system here. This is just a very simple like school scheduling system, I believe, where we have teachers, we've got some students, we've got their grades, we've got the periods that they go to school. Really, the first thing that we have to ask ourselves, and of course, this system is extremely simple, so we may not be able to get as much context as we would like. The first thing we need to do is ask, what kinds of information do we want to understand from this system right here? So, Taylor, do you have any thoughts? What should we look at analyzing first here? I think you're on mute, by the way. Yeah, there you go.
So I was. Thanks to Tom and Google for notifying me. So, what should we look at first here? Well, I mean, I guess it depends on what type of information we're trying to extract here. Did you mention that already?
I did, yes. So I think, and you can let me know if you think this is a good one to start out with. But maybe we want to know who the best students are.
Yeah, yeah, that can definitely be interesting. So if we want to know who the best students are, then oh well, it's not showing me on my screen while I'm speaking. So let me come back over here to take a look. Hey Tom, say something.
Hey,
okay.
Can you see it now? All right, there we go. That's the easiest way to take care of it. So so what we have here though, we see we've got a student, we've got grades, we've got a start and an end time. So I'm guessing that these grades are probably going to be at a class level. It's not going to be individual assignments and whatnot. But that means, actually, we don't even. Well, I guess we do have periods, so that's how that ties into grades. Okay, so that works. Okay, so what we can do here is we can say, I want to know the best students, and the next best question to ask is, well, how do you define the best students, right? Is it the student that comes to class every day? Is it the student that always does their homework, or is it the student that just got the best grades across the board, right? That's a very important clarifying question we got to ask. And if they say, and because our data model here is a little limited, if we say it's how their grades ended up being for each of their classes, you can see that we've got that value there at the bottom. So that's what we can say. We can say we want to understand a student's grade by period, right? By the different class that they have, different subjects that they've got. And so we can take a student, and we can take a class, and we can show a grade, right?
Yep.
And that could be our grade. And you know what we may say? Well, that's not enough just by itself, because maybe a student has to take a class 2 times, right? They take it year 1, and then they have to repeat it, and so they have to take it again. And so we'd probably want to add a date, like a year in there as well, right? So we could show the year, the student, and the class, and then we show those measures, like what was their final grade. And so that's our grade: date, student, and class. All right. So does that kind of make sense how we were able to put together the grain?
Makes sense to me. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and shout out in the comments there.
Yeah, and of course, I wish that we could dig deeper into this. With only having about a half-hour webinar, of course, we can't, dive in too deep. But I'm hoping that this is starting to give you a little taste of how we transform an OLTP system into an OLAP system. And so from this grain, though, now we're able to get some different context, right? We're able to see, okay, this is the year that the student took the class. And, maybe we want to store a bunch of different information on a yearly basis, like, did any problems arise during this year financially for the school? Or were there a lot of days that teachers were on strike, or students weren't able to go to class because maybe there's a natural disaster? Different types of context that we could add into that date dimension. Then, of course, the student dimension, we can have a bunch of different information. In our case, we only have the first name, which is very unfortunate in this system. We can't analyze data that isn't stored in the OLTP system. But just for fun, let's pretend that we have more than that. We've got like a first name and a last name, and we've got what demographic they're in, what if their parents were college graduates or not, if they're on track to go to college or not. These are all items that we can put into that student dimension that we can later drill down. Maybe we want to say, Well, do the best students have college graduated parents? Now it's very, very easy for us to drill down and find those correlations. Then lastly, we need to figure out the classes or really just the subject. And so that's where we can say, was it algebra? Was it calculus? Is this a history class? Is it a geography class? Um, we could even go further on our grain if we wanted to, and show what teacher taught it and what time of the day. Was it first period or was it third period? Those are all items that we could add into our fact table and then have dimensions around that. And so you can start to see how something that may start out small and a very basic grain, we can keep going deeper and deeper and deeper for analytical purposes, so we can really drill in and find all the correlations that are out there. And the reason why we do this is really simple. It's just so that way businesses and organizations can look at their behaviors and figure out where they need to change behaviors, so that way they can improve their processes. So that's what makes the analytical system so powerful. Transactional systems are really great at what they do, and analytical systems are really great at what they do too. So, if you're interested in learning more, I'd highly recommend it. If you're looking at getting into reporting or working with analytical systems, it's great to have a foundation, just because you're going to be surrounded by dimensions and facts all the time. So it's just nice to kind of understand what's going on in that system.
Oh, hey, Tom. So before we wrap up this convo here, M went ahead and messaged us again and said student grades and grade, are they both grains in this scenario, in the scenario you were just describing? And they just wanted you to clarify on that.
Okay, perfect.
So I guess, are they
with
both
the fact
individually or combined or what?
Yeah, perfect. So really with a fact table, you're really only going to have one grain per fact table. And it goes back to convenience and performance. So let's say you have a billion records because your school is awesome and things are really slow because there's a billion records and performance is super important. You could actually make different fact tables. You could have a fact table at the student grain. You could also have it be a student and the grade. And when you put those two in the same fact table, that's what defines the grain. And so really you look at the fact table and you look at the nouns or the dimensions in that fact table, and that's what's going to determine the grain.
Okay, and then in that case, so you're actually making two separate fact tables, one for each scenario, to adjust the grain accordingly. Is that correct?
So you definitely can, if performance is good, and you can put them all in one table. That's always best, just because then it's stored in one place. It's easier to maintain. It's usually easier for people running reports as well. But I'm just trying to show that it doesn't have to be a single fact table with dimensions in your data warehouse. You can have hundreds of fact tables and even more dimensions surrounding those facts.
Gotcha. That makes sense. All right. Hope that answers your question there, Em. Let us know if you want any further clarification, and we'd be glad to help out with that. All right, Tom. So, do you have anything else for us, or are we ready to move on along here?
Yeah, so that was my introduction to data modeling. I'd love to talk more about it. There's just so much you can talk about. Uh, People have conferences and they talk about this subject for days, sometimes for a week even, just because there's so much to go over and it's so useful for organizations and the analytical needs that they have.
That makes sense here. So, moving on along here, I'm now sharing my screen. Tom, let me know. Can you see my screen?
I can, yes.
All right. That's what I'm talking about here. Okay. So, what is next? That's what I want to talk about now. Let me see if I can go full screen here too. Ah, beautiful. Okay. So, what's next? Well, I mean, Tom obviously works doing business intelligence every day, so that would be a great way to learn more. Besides that, Tom was telling me about an in-person workshop that he attended with his work once. And so, what was that like, Tom? Was that
So
yeah?
yeah, it was pretty awesome. We had a somebody who's been doing dimensional data modeling for decades. Actually, one of the original founders come in, and she just went over the history of how it's evolved and how it's been able to solve organizational problems for decades, really. And we just got a lot out of it because we're able to look at the problems that we have in our organization, and then apply a lot of the principles that she taught us.
Okay, well, that's great. How long did she work with you all?
She worked with us for 2 full days.
Okay, two
So
full
yep,
days.
we just sat in a room and chugged through a whole bunch of learning, basically.
All right. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, so I mean that sounds like a great experience. Obviously, Tom learned a lot through that. And so I mean if you can find in-person workshops that talk about this, then that's a great opportunity. I mean, often those are going to be hosted through whatever work you might be doing. So you might petition your boss or employer to go ahead and sign you up for one of those. How much did that cost, Tom? Do you happen to know by chance?
So I don't know the exact numbers, but looking at the website later on, just because I was so impressed with the training, I wanted to see how much that cost, how much benefit I got out of it, and somewhere around $2,000 for those 2 days per person.
All
And so
right,
we
yeah.
had a room full of people. So yeah,
Yes.
that's
So if you've ever wanted a lucrative career, perhaps that's the one, right? You want to go for
yeah,
the
exactly.
decades of experience in dimensional data modeling so that you can go ahead and present these seminars. But I guess what we're getting at here is that those are great opportunities. Cost is rather prohibitive. It's about 2K per person. Of course, it's a lot easier if your employer is paying for it. Great training, but admittedly, yeah, I mean, a lot of us really aren't in a position for that, especially if we don't currently have business intelligence jobs. Um, so, what's the next best thing? Well, that's what we want to get into here. Is we wanted to help provide a resource for all of you that want to take the next step in learning about business intelligence. I mean, how important would you say is knowing this type of information, Tom, in regards to if you're interviewing? So say like last week, if we were talking about interview questions, is it important to know about dimensional data models and that kind of stuff before getting into BI, like going into an
Um, I
interview?
would I would say the foundations is definitely helpful. That's actually we spend about 20 to 25% of our interview process on some of the foundations in data modeling,
Uh-huh.
and the picked up on your data modeling.
Okay, yeah. So it's definitely something that's quite important. And I had a business intelligence interview once, and that is definitely something that they were impressed with, that I knew a little bit about the foundation between facts and then dimensions, and of course the granularity with those. So it's something very important. Of course, once you actually get into the field, it's going to be, I mean, it's what you work with every day. And so we went ahead and we've created a resource for you all. It's called Models from Scratch: Build Your Own Analytical Data Models. It's a 4-part email course, and it runs you through the basics, much more in depth than we went into today, of this type of dimensional data modeling. And as we've referred to it here, it's also can be talked about as an analytical data model. Okay, so quickly want to introduce you to the 4 different chapters or sections of this email course. And we will get to the price here in a second. I can tell you at this very moment that is definitely a lot more economical than the 2K solution. So the first email that we'll send out to you is the case for Kimball. Uh, Kimball is one of the sort of the founding people here in this whole dimensional data modeling setup. And so it'll go into the basics of Kimball methodology and why it is useful to any organization. And did you have anything to add in on that, Tom, or is that pretty good there?
Yeah, that's perfect, Taylor.
Okay, great. So that will be the first email. laying the foundation. And the second email, it'll be our first case study. And in that, we'll go ahead and practice determining the grain that a business user needs data at. So along the lines of what Tom took us through today, at a general level, but of course there we'll be going a lot more in depth with this case study. Also, we'll be determining the dimensions and the facts, and also including some necessary columns as well that we'll want to be displaying for the type of data that we're pulling. Okay, so second email is a case study. Third email, dealing with change. This one will go into the different types of changes and determining which type is necessary. Tom, can you a little bit more for us here?
Yeah, exactly. So within analytics of data, the two biggest challenges usually revolve around hierarchies and histories. And so histories, obviously, there's going to be a lot of data in, trans. So with way on data has happened within the transactional system. That can be really useful if you're trying to figure out, on day 20 something changed and changed really positively. But what changed? Let's figure it out. That's the kind of stuff that's really, really beneficial with history analytics.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tom. So that's email number 3. And then our final email, email number 4, is the second case study. And in this case, we're going to take you over an actual business case, and you'll make a model completely on your own. And of course, we'll be there to help you through making that model, but that will be the subject of the 4th email. Okay, so email 1, laying the Kimball methodology and the basics, the foundation for you. The second email is the first case study where we're starting to deal with determining our dimensions and facts and granularity. The third email where we're going through and looking at that change. And then this 4th email is sort of your mini capstone here, the second case study where you'll build your own business case and build your own model, which really is a phenomenal thing to have for approaching an employer, for going into an intro level position in business intelligence. Definitely can tell you that that will impress pretty much any employer that you go in to see, to show them, hey, I went ahead and built this own model based on this business case here, and I wanted to show you it to show you that I know what I'm talking about here, that I can actually apply what I'm saying. So if all of this interests you at all, then you'll be glad to know that we are opening our carts here to this course. Once again, we'll bring it back to here. Our Models from Scratch, Build Your Own Analytical Data Models course. Typically, we sell this at about $100, but if you go ahead and purchase hours up until 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow, then we will give it to you for the one-time price of $25. Okay, so normally 100, but this time we'll go ahead and give it to you here for just $25. Let me go ahead and switch screens here so that you all can see me once again. Okay, great. So if you have any interest, once again, in moving forward with business intelligence and getting into the field, then this is definitely information that can really set you apart from other people who are applying. Of course, having general SQL querying ability is vastly important. But as Tom said, this is about 25% of the interview that they have going. And if you can nail this type of stuff, then this is the type of stuff that most people who say, oh yeah, I know some SQL, they don't know anything about this kind of stuff. And so if you can go in there citing this type of information and showing an actual model that you've created, I promise you your chances of getting that job are going to be way, way, way better. And also, you'll just understand what you're getting into a lot better as well, which is, of course, very useful. So I'm going to go ahead and put a link to this here in the chat on YouTube. So bear with me for a second while I do that. Okay, here we go. And here, actually, my window's closed. Hey, Tom, can you put this link there? I'm sending it to you right now. Go ahead and put that link. Oh, not that one, actually.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not sure if that was the link you were intending.
Here we go. There you go. All right, so if you can go ahead and put that in the YouTube chat there. So if you are interested in getting this, go ahead, click on that link. That'll take you to the checkout, and then you can go ahead and sign up for the course. The way it will work is that the first email, we'll send you an introductory email welcoming you in, and then the first actual portion of the course will go out next Monday, and then each additional email will go out 1 week after. So email 1 will go out this next Monday, email 2 the following Monday, 3 the next Monday after that, and the 4th one after that. And so we'll send out the emails. You go ahead and read through those, and then there'll be interaction back and forth in between that time as we follow up, make sure you're understanding and answering any questions that you might have. Okay, so that is a next great step for you all is go ahead and hop on into this email course where you can go really a lot more in depth than we went into today and actually get hands-on case studies that you can even present to a potential employer. Okay, so the deal, once again, going through until 8 p.m. tomorrow, from now until then. If you click on that link, then you can get this 4-part email course for only $25, which is 75% off. So I'd highly recommend it. Okay. Well, Tom, do you have anything else you'd like to say for the day?
Well, I just wanted to let you know I was able to finally post that link in the chat. Took me a little longer than I thought it was going to, but yeah, that's there for you right now. And really, the last thing I want to say though is, when in doing interviews, we get a lot of people who come in and they know their SQL pretty well. But the people who really know data modeling, they're the ones who we really think about, and we really say, you know what, those people are going to come in, they're going to pick up on what we're doing really quickly, and it's just going to make life easy. We've even had some people who, they weren't the best candidates in terms of, their energy or their personality, and even their SQL was a little weak, but then they knew data modeling really, really well, and it just made us think, we might want this person because they're so good with data modeling. So if you're really looking for a skill to bolster or be a companion to your SQL skills, I'd highly recommend data modeling to be the skill you look at picking up next.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tom. Yeah, so I mean, Tom took that $2,000 2-day training live. This email course will definitely give you a solid chunk of value comparable to that. I mean, at the price of $25. So we invite all of you to join in on that. Let us know if you have any questions, and also feel free to reach out to us with future webinar topics you'd like us to talk about, because we definitely want to reach out and meet your needs. Okay, so that's about it for today. And we'll be sending out an email about that promotion, about the email course once again over the next 24 hours too. But until next time, have a good time, everybody, and keep on querying away.